The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to proceed now with our reading and discussion of the book Rome and Civil Liberty by James A. Wiley. We're concluding our discussion about the particular, well, for lack of a better term, feud that is taking place between the Vatican and the Roman Catholic government of Piedmont. That's right, the Vatican and Piedmont, the governments of France and the southeastern part of the country, are at odds over the Pope's power. Italy and France joined forces previously and routed the land of occupation by the Bible-believing Piedmontese, the valley people, the Vaudois, and the Waldenses. They led a crusade, a papal crusade against the Bible-believing Christians of the country. And once they were removed, then eventually there arose a controversy between the governments, the civil government, and the Roman authority. The government was upset over the criminality of the priests, and the sanctity of the priests could not be tried in the civil courts. The churches, the Roman Catholic churches, were literally asylums for criminals, and they wanted the priests to answer to the civil power. They wanted to bring them to justice. The Pope said no. And so rather than to rehash all of this discussion that we've previously talked about, we'll continue now with the conclusion of the matter. He says, "Let this fact then be borne in mind, for a fact it is." And by the way, we're reading the last full paragraph on page 143 where we concluded yesterday. He said, "Let this fact then be borne in mind. Take notice, for a fact it is, that the Church of Rome is advancing claims in Piedmont which carry as full and supreme a measure of jurisdiction over temporal affairs, that is, over princes and states, as ever were advanced by Hildebrand," that's Pope Gregory VII of the 11th century. "And let this other deliverance of the pontifical court be borne in mind, that no state can change its political organization without the consent of the Roman See, without the consent of the papacy. This doctrine," says the author, "would stereotype Europe." All right? It would control Europe and fashion all the states of Europe to be identical. That the Pope would be the supreme temporal ruler in all those states in Europe. In other words, he would make all the states of Europe look the same. He would rule over all of them, just like he did in the Old World Order. He says this doctrine would stereotype Europe. Not one of its states dare introduce a single reform or take one step in the path of political and social amelioration lest thereby the interests of the Roman Catholic Church would suffer. Nor are these doctrines confined to the continent. Listen carefully. It says hundreds of zealous teachers are now sedulously propagating these doctrines in England and the colonies. What colonies do you suppose he's talking about? Well, of course, the British colonies, the United States of America. And he says, and there, alas, they are experiencing a reception denied them elsewhere. Where were they denied? Well, Piedmont. The people and the government of Piedmont were up in arms about these papal pretensions. That the idea that the Pope should be the supreme temporal ruler over Piedmont did not sit well with the government nor the people of Piedmont. Of course, it was fully supported by the priests, the criminal priests. So where were these same pretensions being upheld? In England. Protestant England. And Protestant colonial America. Rome's never been seriously opposed in this country. Yes, she was seriously opposed in England, but at the time of the writing of this book, England was capitulating to Rome. But they did not fully understand what Rome had in mind. Should religious liberty be restored to Roman Catholics? And that's the subject of our next discussion. How did the papacy gain the foothold, the supremacy in England? How did this papal aggression, as the author refers to it, how did it come about? The next chapter, the next portion of the book is entitled Liberalism and Popery, or Rome's Reciprocity in Toleration. He says there were two parties to whom the papal aggression occasioned an equal surprise. These were the liberals on the one side and the Roman Catholics on the other. Okay? Let me just give you a basis for understanding before we continue our reading. There was a sect of liberals, Protestants, but regarded as liberals in England, who saw Roman Catholics as fellow citizens of Great Britain. They'd fought side by side. They'd worked side by side. They had jointly participated in the wealth and the affluence of England. And these liberal Protestants saw Roman Catholics as equal co-religionists or Christians. Okay? They completely forgot about the history of the papacy. They completely forgot about the numerous attempts to overthrow the Protestant government 100 years ago, previously in England. They forgot about the gunpowder plot. They forgot about the Spanish Armada. They forgot about the Babington plot. They forgot about the civil wars that literally racked England, repeated civil wars in a struggle for the papacy to overthrow the crown of England and to take complete control. They were like Vatican Council II Protestants. We want to give religious liberty to the Catholics. They've been suppressed ever since these so-called incidents, and they don't share. While they work side by side with us, they fight and defend the country side by side with us, they don't have religious liberty. We do, but they don't have religious liberty. The government is being abusive to these equal citizens in Great Britain, and they ought to have religious liberty. And of course, the Catholics loved their Protestant counterparts taking up the sword in their defense and putting pressure on the government to acknowledge Roman Catholicism and to take away the laws that restricted it. They thought they were doing God's service, didn't they? I mean, we love toleration. We love religious liberty. We champion it as a virtue. Okay, but what do you think happened to those Protestants when, after those laws were rescinded, and the immediate response of the papacy was to send a papal legate, a cardinal, to the country to read a papal bull and just autonomously, without consulting the legitimate government of the country, establish dioceses with the bishop to rule over those dioceses in both spiritual and temporal affairs. And for the Roman Catholic publications to come out and say, the Queen is no queen, the Parliament is no parliament, the laws that they pass are no laws at all, we abide by the Roman Catholic canon law, and our only king is the Pope. And all of you Protestants in Great Britain are heretics. You're not co-religionists with us. You're not Christians with us. You're heretics. You're rebels against the legitimate throne of God on the earth, the Vatican. And what a surprise it came to the Protestants who once defended the Roman Catholic cause in England, that their call for religious liberty would be answered by intolerance by the Roman Catholic Church. Isn't that what happened in Vatican Council II? What did we get for laying down the sword at Vatican Council II? We got papal tyranny. We just simply, when we laid down at Vatican Council II and considered Roman Catholicism Christianity, and that we ought to unite as Christians, co-religionists, well, how did Rome answer? The same way they answered in England. They asserted to themselves a political mandate. Now that the Protestants have surrendered, we own America. And we've had a papal government ever since. And we've been fighting papal crusades all over the country ever since. Paying reparation to the Vatican for the losses sustained by the Vatican since the Protestant Reformation. It was a complete and total surrender of the Protestants to the Roman Catholic Church. That's how it was perceived by Rome. Well, this is exactly the way this capitulation was perceived by Rome in England at this time. When the anti-Catholic laws were rescinded, the Pope just stepped in and said, well, they've surrendered, we're going to take over. And they did. James A. Wiley calls it the papal aggression. And so who were surprised? Number one, the Protestants, who had carried the sword of liberation for the Catholics, who now saw how the papacy was answering their just cause by making them heretics. And the others who were surprised were the Roman Catholics, who now have religious liberty or religious domination, or let's just call it religious exclusivity. And they are upset and surprised by the new reaction of the liberal Protestants who helped liberate them. Why would these Protestants be offended if we call them heretics now? They've always been heretics. They're not members of the Catholic Church, the one holy Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church outside of which there is no salvation. We thank you, Protestants, very much for your kind, considerate, but you ought to submit to the new authority in England now. You ought to submit to the Pope and to the rule of the bishops. Isn't this what you wanted in helping us gain our religious liberty? Okay, that's what happened in England. And that's what's happening in the United States of America. Now, some liberal Protestants who would have voted for unity with the Roman Catholic Church. No more Protestant protest against the Antichrist. He's not the Antichrist. We believe in a future one. So we've exonerated the papacy now. We want to be co-religionists, co-Christians with Roman Catholics. No more protest. The protest is over. So what did Rome see in that gracious humanity? An opportunity. An opportunity to take over. And that's what we've got. A papal aggression in the United States perfectly parallel to the one that took place in Great Britain at the time of the writing of this book. There were two parties after the papal aggression. There were two parties that were equally offended, shocked, and horrified. The liberal Protestants and the Catholics. It says there were two parties to whom the papal aggression occasioned an equal surprise. These were the liberals on the one side and the Roman Catholics on the other. The liberals were amazed that the Romanists, the Roman Catholics, should advance such claims as were implied by the papal aggression. And not less amazed were the Roman Catholics that the liberals should for one moment oppose these claims. Again, what are the claims? That the Pope is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Without a Protestant protest any longer in England, the Pope becomes the king of the land. The Queen is no queen, the Parliament is no parliament, and the laws that they pass are no laws at all. Oh, and by the way, you Protestants who helped liberate us from the tyranny of the Queen and the Parliament and these anti-Roman Catholic canon laws, we thank you very much. Now we can install the throne of God in England, the papacy. And of course, that means that you are, once again, you Protestants, heretics. It says the liberals were amazed that the Romanists should advance such claims. The claims that the Pope is the ruler of England. Parliament's no parliament, the Queen is no queen. As were applied to the papal aggression, and not less amazed were the Roman Catholics that the liberals should for one moment oppose these claims. What, you Protestants helped this happen? Why are you now unhappy that the Pope is the King of England? You helped rescind those anti-Roman Catholic laws. You wanted to be co-religionists with us. That means you want to be equal Roman Catholics with us. Why don't you convert to the Roman Catholic Church and we won't call you heretics anymore? And the Protestants are spinning. And the Roman Catholics are just as amazed all of a sudden that the Protestants have seemed to change their mind. You see the confusion? Isn't that the confusion that's happening today? Protestants all of a sudden are very concerned about the loss of our liberties in this country, about all the many wars that we fight with Muslims. They say to themselves, this is a Protestant nation. We believe in religious liberty. We don't fight wars in the name of religion. We believe in religious liberty. So why is the United States fighting religious? And look, if you think this is a war on terror, I got a bridge to sell you. Okay. It's not a war on terror. It's a war on Islam. It's a papal crusade. So why is the country fighting these crusades against the Muslims? Why are we losing our Protestant liberties? Well, because you signed the documents of capitulation at Vatican Council II. You signed the documents of surrender at Vatican Council II. Now, why are you unhappy? The protest is over. Whether you like it or not, the protest is over, say the Roman Catholics in the country. We're now united Christians, and we've got a job to do in the world. That is to rout out heresy. Now, are you with us or not? Are you not with us? Because we could just as easily call you heretics now and rout you out as soon as we're done with the Muslims. America's starting to wake up. The deal that they bought at Vatican Council II was the same deal that the liberals in England bought at the time of the writing of this book. That was their Vatican Council II. This one's ours. This is what happens when you lay down your weapons, your spiritual weapons, against Antichrist, and you begin to view him as an equal Christian. He becomes a tyrant. There's no grace, no forgiveness with the Pope. He demands to be King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And it's not God's holy, eternal, and immutable law that he imposes upon the people. It's Roman Catholic canon law. And Roman Catholic canon law in a nutshell means you shall bend your knee, every man, woman, and child on the planet, to the Pope of Rome. Two people were shocked. Two groups of people were shocked. The liberals that liberated the Catholics, and the Catholics who saw their liberators suddenly unhappy with the outcome of that liberation. The liberals were amazed that the Catholics should advance such claims as were implied in the papal aggression, and not less amazed were the Roman Catholics that the liberals should for one moment oppose those claims. In the ranks of either party there reigned blank astonishment and mortifying disappointment. It's by no means difficult to account for this. The liberals of Great Britain had taken the Romanists to be what they professed to be. What was that? What was that? What do you suppose the Romanists professed to be? Christians. And the liberals believed them. They're not Christians, they're papists. If you believe a Roman Catholic is a Christian, you might do the same as the liberals did. That's what the Protestants did at Vatican Council II. You might believe that they're Christians. But you might well study what Roman Catholicism really is. It's popery. That's as plain a terms as I can put it. They replace Christ with the Pope. And the Pope is the Antichrist of the Bible. And if the Antichrist of the Bible gets power handed to him on a silver platter, as he did at Vatican Council II, what do you expect he'll do about it? He'll destroy Protestants, the ones who liberated him. He says, in the ranks of either party there reigned blank astonishment and mortifying disappointment. It is by no means difficult to account for this. The liberals of Great Britain had taken the Romanists to be what they professed to be, and had espoused their quarrel as against the Protestantism of the country, in the belief that Protestantism had done them a wrong. They believed that their Protestant church was unfairly treating the Roman Catholics in the country. Those who forever, it seems, attempted to make the Pope the king of the country. Tried to overthrow the government, tried to blow up Parliament, tried to invade the country through the Spanish Armada. All of a sudden, the Protestants began to believe that they were being abusive to the Roman Catholics, abusive to fellow Christians. He says they never doubted that the Church of Rome had shared in the progress of all around her, and that she was willing, perhaps even a little more than some Protestants, to reciprocate tolerance with the other churches of the land. The liberals had fought the battle of Catholic emancipation, entertaining these views. Okay? This is the mindset of the liberal Protestants in England that liberated the monster. Let the monster out of his box. They never doubted that the Church of Rome had shared in the progress of all around her. Okay? They worked just as hard as the Protestants in the factories. Oh, I've run out of time for the first half. We'll be back right after the message. Inquisition update on First Amendment Radio.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. If you want to support the program, please support First Amendment Radio, who sponsors it. And if you'd like to contact me, please do so by email. My email address is tom@seawaves.us. Now, these liberal Protestants thought they were doing God's service. They saw fellow Roman Catholics share equally in the burdens of sustaining the country. They were Britons. They regarded them as Britons, not papists. And they never doubted that the Church of Rome had shared in the progress of their country, and that the Roman Catholic Church was willing, perhaps even a little more than some Protestants, to reciprocate tolerance with the other churches of the land. There's their mistake. Roman Catholicism is equivalent to intolerance. And yet, these liberal Protestants, not understanding, saw the intolerance of Protestants against this Roman Antichrist to be unreasonable, to be unchristian-like behavior. And so they thought they were doing good things by defending the Roman Catholics, the oppressed Roman Catholics, the suppressed Roman Catholic religion. Okay? They saw the Roman Catholic Church, erroneously, of course, but they saw the Roman Catholic Church as equally tolerant, and that they would reciprocate toleration for toleration. That is the grievous error. He says the liberals had fought the battle of Catholic emancipation entertaining these views. Their argument required that Romanists should be viewed as really liberal men. They had striven to represent them as such. In many instances, we doubt not, in the honest conviction that they actually were such. Okay? So they were just following their consciences. It literally thought that Catholicism was liberal. No such thing. No such thing. They had to have thought the same thing at Vatican Council II. Oh, they said, well, the Roman Catholic Church is changing. The Pope no longer wears the beehive hat, the tiara. The Pope, they no longer carry the Pope around Rome on a litter, fanning him with ostrich feathers. You know, they've changed the Latin Mass, and it can be said now into the vernacular so the people can understand what's being said. Rome has changed. It's now a Christian church, and we ought to defend their rights. Okay? They all thought they were doing God's service. That's what happened at Vatican Council II. Wrong. We're paying the price now, just as England paid the price for liberating Romanism. He said, we doubt not they did all these things in the honest conviction that they were actually liberal, that the Roman Catholics were actually liberal. And he said they had repeated their arguments so often as to have at last been the dupes of their own statements and reasonings. And great was their astonishment when they beheld the church of Pope Pius IX put on the features of the church of Hildebrand, Gregory VII, and the champions of freedom, as they had taken them to be, suddenly exhibit themselves as the astute maintainers of despotism. When liberty had been achieved for the Roman Catholic Church, the first thing the Pope did was to impose his despotism on England. So the liberals got what they deserved. Just like the Protestants are getting what they deserve post-Vatican Council II. And what is it that we're getting? Remember the struggle that took place in Piedmont? The papacy literally claimed over the governments of Piedmont, I am the government. You may make no laws respecting religion. You may make no laws that affect religion. And not only that, I am the head of your temporal government. And you may not change even the form of your government without my approval. And remember that all of those tenets were as resulted from a concordat signed by the Piedmontese government and the papacy. And those same tenets are being imposed in this country today. So says James A. Wiley. It was being imposed in England, a Protestant country, and the colonies, a Protestant country. Sanctity of the Pope, the primacy of the Pope, the superiority of the Pope, the immunity of the Pope, the all-encompassing power, both spiritual and temporal, of the Pope. It was being imposed in England, it's being imposed in the United States, just as it was being imposed in Piedmont, a concordat country. You know, I've said many times and received much criticism for saying so, that I believe that the United States has signed secretly a concordat with the Vatican. I've been accused of making that up. But listen, if we are imposing or allowing to be imposed in our government the tenets, the standard tenets of every concordat that was signed with the Vatican, then whether or not this country has literally signed a concordat, we have a concordat, in fact. Because the tenets of the concordat are being implemented in this country. The United States has become a concordat nation, whether it has signed the documents or not. And we're paying the price. We're paying the price. The country has been taken over by the Vatican. And of course, as long as the United States believes the great threat to the United States is Islam, then the crusade will continue. And all the better for the Pope that now controls the government. You see the duplicity in the mainstream media? Even in your church pastor? Warning you about the terrors of Islam? Now, I'm not saying that Islam isn't dangerous. I'm just plain telling you that it's just it's cover for the Pope, who now controls the government. This is what happens when you capitulate to Rome. Rome's not obliged to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to heretic Protestants. Rome's not going to come right out and tell you that she controls the government, as she did the government of Piedmont. That would awaken too many slumbering Protestants. They just go on about their business and let the Protestants sleep. Wake them up just in time to go fight a papal crusade. or wake them up just in time to saddle up and pay their taxes to finance these papal crusades. Just leave them in their ignorance. They're heretics. We seek the advantage of having them on our side, but when we're done with the Muslims, next we'll take care of the other heretics, the Protestants. We hired our own executioner at Vatican Council II. Just like liberal Englanders hired their own assassins at the time of the writing of this book. It's as plain as the nose on your face. The very strategies, the Piedmontese strategies that they were using in England, they were using here in the colonies too. The Pope has steadily, unceasingly gained more and more and more control of our government. And I say away with this liberal Protestant defense of the Church of Antichrist and the Antichrist himself, the papacy. Otherwise, you could just kiss your rights completely goodbye. You're going to be an abject slave to the man of sin. And he's going to brand you with his mark. If you think so little of your Protestantism as to have surrendered it to Rome at Vatican Council II, you ought to wear the mark of Rome. You see how much repenting we've got to do? Oh, but Tom, there you go again. You sound angry. Christians aren't supposed to be angry. There you go again, Tom. You sound hateful. We're not supposed to be hateful as Christians. We're supposed to love everybody. Isn't God love? This is why Israel killed all the prophets. They didn't like the sound of the truth. The Protestants took up the sword to liberate their fellow Roman Catholics in England, and they repeated their arguments in defense of Rome so often as to have become the last dupes of their own statements and reasonings. And great was their astonishment when they beheld the Roman Catholic Church under Jesuit-trained Pope Pius IX put on the features of Pope Gregory VII in the middle of the Dark Ages, at the height of papal power. And the champions of freedoms, as they had taken them to be, suddenly exhibited themselves as the astute maintainers of despotism. That's what a papist is. An astute maintainer of despotism. An astute maintainer of Antichrist. And he said the Romanists on their side were equally astonished, not conscious of any change in themselves and feeling that change was impossible, for to renounce infallibility it was the same as renouncing Catholicism. They had not realized the misconception entertained of them by the liberals. They believed that men who had stood so long on the same platform with them, who had said so many fine things of them, and who had fought for well nigh a quarter of a century to effect them a release from the restrictions under which they lay, were prepared for the use which they intended to make of their new freedom, and which they did make of it in the papal aggression. So why now those who were so championing, those Protestants who championed Christian liberty, or rather Christian unity and Christian peace at Vatican Council II, why should they now be so up in arms about the loss of their rights and their liberties? You championed tyranny and despotism at Vatican Council II. Now you're getting the tyranny and despotism. Why are you unhappy? The Roman Catholics couldn't understand the reaction of the liberal Protestants who helped liberate them when the Pope just barged right in and divided up the land into dioceses, appointed a bishop over all, and said the Queen is a clown and the Parliament is a pauper, and they have no business in government. The Pope's the king, the bishops are his emissaries here in the country. The Roman Catholic churches are now sacrosanct. And by the way, we're going to take over the Church of England too, because it's a heretic church. We're going to restore the church that existed before Henry VIII. We're going to establish true religion in England. We're going to do away with heresy. We're going to do away with the heretics. And finally, the kingdom of God has come to England. And all of a sudden, the Protestants are upset. And the Catholics just simply answered, why are you upset? We thought you understood what you were doing. Same thing's happening in the United States of America. Roman Catholics look at people like me and say, why are you upset? We thought you knew what you were doing when you signed the documents of capitulation at Vatican Council II. That the government of the United States is heretical, it's Protestant. We want to restore the Pope's crown here in England, or in the United States. And you're not happy? That we've replaced all the laws of Protestant with Roman Catholic canon law? You're unhappy? Why? You helped liberate us by calling us equal. You don't even believe the Pope's the Antichrist anymore. Why don't you unite with us under him? Same thing. History repeating itself. Keep making the same mistakes. Keep making the same mistake, plural or singular. Keep making the same mistake, thinking that Romanism is Christianity. We keep making the same mistake over and over and over throughout history. It's just impossible that the world won't wake up. The Protestants fought well nigh a quarter of a century to effect the release of the Romanists and the restrictions under which the Romanists lay, the anti-Catholic laws. But they weren't prepared for the use that the Romanists made of their new liberty. They weren't prepared for papal aggression. He says, great therefore was their surprise, and still greater their rage. Rage, yeah, that's right, Protestants were enraged when they found that their old friends, the Roman Catholics, their co-religionists, their co-citizens in Great Britain, the ones who helped raise Britain back up to be one of the most powerful nations in the world, had turned suddenly around and became their assailants. There was an egregious misconception on both sides. The Protestants were surprised and disappointed, and so were the Catholics. But who do you suppose in Britain was not surprised, nor astonished? The papacy was jubilant. Capitalized on the ignorance of both Catholics and Protestants. He says, we take it for granted that the great traditionary maxims of the Liberal Party are still held by the liberals of our day. They would not, we presume, disavow the great principles taught by Milton and Locke on the subject of toleration. They would grant that there is and must be a line between which toleration cannot be carried, that we cannot tolerate intolerance, for it, in that case, oneself would be intolerant, would he not? Even under the government of Cromwell, which tolerated the Jews, a very rare stretch of liberalism in those times, toleration, as Macaulay informs us, was refused to papists. Under Cromwell, there was no toleration for popery. And it says, and the sentiments of the protector, Cromwell, was those of his Latin secretary. Quote, if all cannot be of one mind, says Milton, as who looks they should be, this doubtless is more prudent, more wholesome, and more Christian, that many be tolerated rather than all compelled. I mean not tolerated popery and open superstition, which, as it extirpates all religious and civil supremacies, so itself should be extirpate, provided first that all the charitable and compassionate means be used to win and regain the weak and the misled, unquote. He says, and we presume also that no liberal statesman of the present day would challenge the maxim of Locke on this subject. Quote, that church, says the philosopher, can have no right to be tolerated by the magistrate, that is, by the civil government, which is constituted on such a bottom or such a basis that all those who enter into it do thereby ipso facto deliver themselves up to the protection and service of another prince. Okay? This is the limit to which toleration should stop. When toleration means that you automatically become the subject of a foreign potentate, there's no more room for toleration. And that's exactly what Rome expects of every country, that it be tolerated until every man, woman, and child in that nation finds himself a subject of the Roman pontiff. And to the degree that you do not become a subject of the Roman pontiff, that is the degree to which you have been intolerant to the Roman Catholic Church. I want you to know what toleration means, coming from a Roman Catholic. It means intolerance. He says that church can have no right to be tolerated by the state, which is constituted on such a bottom that all those who enter into it do hereby ipso facto deliver themselves up to the protection and service of the Pope. For by this means the state, he adds, that magistrate is the word he uses, but he's referring to the civil power, would give away to the settling of a foreign jurisdiction in his own country and suffer his own people to be listed, as it were, for soldiers against his own government. That's what happens when you allow the Pope to come in and divide up your land into dioceses and appoint a bishop over each one. You have assented, you have tolerated Roman Catholicism to that degree. Now you're on the road to tyranny. Papal tyranny. You will become a subject of a foreign pope, a foreign potentate, and you will become the weapons by which your government will be overthrown. That's what happened at Vatican Council II. Without their knowledge, they became assailants of their own Protestant government. And that's what it means to tolerate Rome. To tolerate Rome, you must completely surrender. You must give up your sovereignty in Christ. Give up your liberty in Christ and become a slave of the Pope, and to help him overthrow your government. That's tolerance. See, there's a limit to tolerance. There is a point in time when the word tolerance becomes an evil. When tolerance means that you let the papal Frankenstein out of his box, that is the point when liberty and tolerance becomes an evil. That is the point where tolerance should not be tolerated in any state. I'll see you tomorrow.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.